If you scroll down a little farther on this exam format page, you'll see last year's AP exam. You can open it up and you can see the free response questions. You can see how it's laid out with the booklet with the formula sheets in the front and the tables in the back. So I'll open that up for you right now. We'll take a look real quickly at that. So here's what the booklet looks like. So here you see the formula sheets first. There's the formula sheets. There's question 1, question 2, and so you can see you're given plenty of room to write. And all the way down, I'll just show you at the end. Here are the tables that you can write on the tables, you can write on the formula sheet, you can write all over this. Now, one thing you do have to be careful of is it says use a pencil or pen with black or dark blue ink only. Do not write your name. Do not write outside this box. So the reason why is they're going to scan these pages in, and a lot of these will be graded by people on computers. From it won't be all like they'll be grading the paper booklet. They'll be grading digital copies of your paper booklet. So make sure that you do stay within the black lines, and that if you are a person who tends to write kind of lightly with a pencil, it would be better, and I would say probably in general it would be better on the free response part, use a pen with black or dark blue ink, because it will show up better for digital purposes, and then they won't have to worry about not being able to read what you wrote. If you make a mistake, just draw a line through it. So don't worry about that. I would say pencil or pen would be better for the free response part. Pencil, of course, you have to use on the multiple choice because you have to use Scantron. It'll be graded with a Scantron type of a thing. It'll be bubbling in your answers. Now, I wanted to point out that they give you plenty of space to write your answers. You don't have to use all of the space. The idea is some people write big, some people make a mistake, need to cross something out and start over. So don't feel like you have to fill up all the space. You might have half a page and you might have a 2-sentence answer, and that's perfectly fine. You just fill it as long as you've completely answered the question, or maybe you just have a small calculation. Now, I want to point out that this is, right here, this is an inference question. Is there convincing statistical evidence at the significance level of alpha equals 0.05 that the manager's belief is correct? And they give you this whole inference thing. And so complete the appropriate inference procedure. Well, you're supposed to pick out a particular hypothesis, a statistical test to do, test of significance. I always called it a hypothesis test. Tests of significance are the same thing. And they give you this whole page to answer. Well, how much work is appropriate to show for that? All right, because you know that that's a 4. Now, when it says, is there convincing statistical evidence, this is not use your own common sense and kind of like try to justify your answer with a few numbers. No, this is you're supposed to write a hypothesis, check the conditions, calculate the test statistic and the p-value, and then write a good conclusion based on that. Compare that to the, your p-value to alpha and all that. So you have to go through that. So how much work do you actually need to show for a problem like that? Okay, so I want to go look at another handout I have, and this is something that Mrs. Rumke should have gotten to you. Make sure that you specifically label and identify your value, your parameter, whether it's a mean, a proportion, slope, or whatever it is that they're doing inference on. Make sure that you refer to it as the population or the true mean or proportion, okay? Don't just say amount or something vague like that. Actually talk about a mean, a proportion, a slope, whatever it is that you are doing an inference test on. If it's a chi-square, you know how to write the hypotheses for those. Make sure you use correct symbols. Make sure that you check the conditions. Not just say random check, 10% condition check, normal check. Don't, actually use the appropriate conditions for that test and check that they are fulfilled by explaining how they are fulfilled. Often with a normal model, you have to do a little calculation like NP, NQ greater than 10, or you have to do some kind of a little, show a graph. Make sure that you actually draw the graph if you have to check that condition. Now, what about the do step where you're actually doing those computations? What about all those formulas? Notice here there aren't any formulas. There isn't a normal model sketch. So why not? Well, often, not always, but often, that is not a requirement for the inference question on the AP exam, the one where they just ask you to do a whole test or a whole confidence interval. They're more concerned that you know the whole process, that you write a good conclusion and a good hypothesis and all that. So, if you're pressed for time, you're not sure of the formula, you don't want to risk doing it wrong, make sure you write down the test statistic, whether it's the Z or the T, depending on which type of test. Z for proportion, T for mean, T for slope. The p-value, and then that you always compare the p-value to alpha, which I usually put as part of the conclusion, but they kind of put it up here. If there's a degree of freedom involved, make sure you write that down. That actually kind of goes with the name of the test. Make sure that you name the test you did, because if you don't show any formulas, they don't know which test you did, and you will not get credit for the do step. So you need to name the test. Often this is enough work for the do step. Rest assured, you still need to know those formulas because you're going to get tested on them somewhere in the test, maybe on the multiple choice, maybe on a different part of the free response or something. But you may not need them on the actual test, on the actual free response part of the test. And it would be better to leave them off if you're not sure you're going to get them right than to put them on and get them wrong and mess up an otherwise perfect problem. Because if you had all of this right and you would have gotten credit for it, and then you put a wrong formula on, it's possible you might lose credit instead of gaining it. Okay, so I'm just saying for the exam, that's kind of good advice. As far as other showing work, as I've mentioned in another video, like if it's particularly the probability problems, show all your work on the probability problems. I think I gave some. I think I gave some help on that here. No, this is just. The rest of this handout is really helpful, good advice, and I would read it carefully and make sure you do read this. That are really important. But I think I'm not going to go through all of this word for word. If you have any questions on any of this, please ask me. So probability work on the exam. So if we go back and look at this exam and find the probability question. Okay, calculate and interpret the expected value for the number of gift cards a particular employee will receive. Okay, calculate, make sure you show the calculation. Interpret, explain what it means. That's what it's saying here. Determine that the probability, show your work. They're actually making it pretty obvious that you need to do this. Sometimes they'll just say compute the probability, and people think, oh, it doesn't really matter if I show it because it's really easy. Make sure you show it. Anyway, I want to go back to this this exam page and show there's scoring guidelines that show you this is really helpful, and I think you would benefit from reading this. You can get this for more exams than just this one, but if you go through here, they start with each question. They tell you what it is that they're trying to determine, what you know, and then they give things that students tended to do well and not do well, common mistakes they made, and then this is really very helpful. This is things that students did wrong, and then this is a response that would demonstrate full understanding. So these are good examples of good ways to respond to the questions, and these are common misconceptions. And then these are tips for teachers, but they're also really good for students, is things that students tend to forget or tend to do wrong. So if you read through this, even for just one test, this would be really, really helpful. You know, common misconceptions and knowledge gaps and all kinds of really good stuff on this scoring guidelines and Chief Reader report scoring statistics. This is really, really helpful. You can get this if you go to this thing, past exam questions. You can go to other past exams and get the same information. Sample responses are just what they say. They show 3 different student responses. One's usually scored a 4, one's maybe scored a 3 or a 2, one scored a 2 or a 1. So they show you why they scored each one the way they did, what they were looking for. Very helpful. So let me just kind of look at one of these here. So they show the model solution. In other words, if this were like the ideal solution, this is what you would be expected to show, and they tell you how they score it, an E, a P, or an I. Essentially correct, partially correct, incorrect. And then they show you and then how they use, like 3 E's give you a score of a 4, 2 E's and a P would give you a score of a 3, etc. All right, and then, and I don't know if Mrs. Rumpke's talked to you about that, so if she hasn't, I'd be glad to tell you more about how that scoring works. And then they show you 3 responses, and then they show how they were each scored. So sample 1A was scored a 4, here's why. Sample 1B was scored a 2, here's where they missed, points and why they missed the points. Sample C scored a 1, here's why they missed the points. And so you might be surprised at some of the 2s and 1s, and you think, oh, I would have written that. And this will give you some ideas of what you might, just to be aware of what little things might dock you points. So those are really, even if you just were able to do this for one exam, I think it would be really helpful to read through the 2021 exam and see how it was scored and see what the questions were like. Of course, this isn't multiple choice, just the free response. You click on this, it'll take you back to previous exams. There's 2020, 2020, 2019, and so forth, and you can see the same information that you could see for 2021. So you won't run out of study resources. You'll run out of time, but I would at least take the time to look through some of these things to help you kind of know what's to be expected. It'll help you feel more comfortable, more prepared.